Annielytics. And now, welcome to the Annielytics podcast with your host, Laura Edel.
Good after energy and the stories and sort of the level of authenticity that the women we've chatted to this year is just, it's profoundly changed so much of how I look at my own career and what I'm doing, and even how I talk as a mother and to my family and to my team. And so in that vein, I recently met with Corinne, is it Stroum? Stroum. And I love that, because in my head, I'm like, Corinne Stroum is very strong. I have this poem now that I'm going through and just my impression of meeting with you. And she inspired me so much as a woman. And we were talking about work and other things. And I had to have her on the podcast because, you know, in that moment of vulnerability, I was able to meet her daughter. And it was just such an amazing, you know, point of, you know, motherhood to motherhood, while talking about technology, while talking about all of these amazing things that we've gone through. And so I really appreciate, Corinne, you being here today, and welcome to Annielytics podcast.
This is great. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you. So why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and, you know, where you are today, and just a little bit about who Corinne is.
Sure, absolutely. I actually made a slide for this to present earlier this week. You may have seen it. I called it my career in shoes.
I love it.
Yeah. So I am a healthcare data analytics geek. My career actually began in medical devices, and my journey, which we'll talk about today, has taken me into the world of software and big data, machine learning and predictive analytics. And so I currently work as the Vice President for Utilization and Cost Solutions at KenSci. We are a healthcare specific machine learning platform and set of solutions for which I own, you know, a whole suite related to health systems, risk-bearing provider organizations, and more recently, health plans, particularly in the Medicare Advantage space.
So, you know, this is a space, and this is why I had been chatting with Corinne, that in helping our customers and some of the work that we're going to be doing in some of our shared customer space, you know, healthcare is one of those very sensitive issues when we start talking about machine learning and responsible AI. When I say those two terms together, so machine learning and responsible AI, what does that mean to you?
It's a great question. I speak a lot about my ethical North Star, which is a colleague of mine, Dr. Carly Eckert. She's been doing a lot of work in the research realm, trying to understand what it means to either detect or perpetuate bias in machine learning. When I first joined, you know, we talked a lot about what we called FAT ML, fairness, accountable, and transparent. Now it's FATE, because we have to include ethics. And I believe that there's sort of three principles. So sort of know how protected classes and protected features are handled on the way in, meaning, is there something coming in that's already biased?
Right.
Is your model then putting that out into the world? So is your model introducing it? So monitoring your performance. And then most interestingly, there's sort of, well, what happens after the fact? So we call this allocation. So what happens now, let's say if you recommend that a certain protected class be admitted at a higher rate, do you actually see that taken into action, or do people flip the script again and sort of disregard what your model might say and put their own human interests in there as well? So it's an extremely nuanced approach. There's no solution yet. You know, we can build any accountability we want into our models. We can try and ensure that as we surface this information to the users, we're being transparent about this, but people can still do what they will. And so we haven't solved it yet, but I hope that the lessons that we've learned in the last year of the public health emergency have truly brought attention and need to this issue.
Yeah, it's one of these things. It's interesting because, you know, as kitschy as it sounds, you know, with the great power that data scientists have is that true great responsibility. And, you know, prior to becoming sort of the in thing to talk about, which right now a lot of people are, you know, on this bandwagon of responsible AI, it was one of those things as a practitioner in my early career of running computer vision and facial recognition that I recognized early on in the populations that I was in testing in real world that, people that were of color or of other classes than what we were, that we were measuring against as we rolled this out into real world that weren't just of a white specific look, that we were having terrible testing. And it made me start to think, well, why would that be? And just walking that track of, oh, wow, we're using, what I thought was a blessed set of training images, and then learning that even, great leaders of the past and great, data scientists and researchers, they had their own, error in coming up and building these things. And so, I think this goes back into this idea that no matter how you perceive someone as being the expert, that we are human and we are human susceptible to error and fault, and that is by nature. How do you, when you're looking back at sort of the mistakes maybe that you've made or introduced, because I certainly know my own, how do you rectify that and sort of say, you know what, I'm going to own this. And now I'm going to use this as something I'm going to learn from and, teach others or, move forward from. But how do you move forward when you do make a mistake that maybe is so large in your perception that it feels very hard to move from?
Absolutely. I think there are actual events dedicated to this now, this concept of embracing your failures and recognizing what you can learn from them. There was a manager that I had who used to speak in a lot of parables, tell a lot of stories. And this one stood out to me the most of everything he taught me, which is success has many parents, but failure is an orphan. And I remember that was after, that
one's pretty profound.
I love this one. So he said it after a particularly, I think, unsuccessful upgrade attempt with one of our clients. We were an analytics platform for them that they had come to depend upon, and the upgrade rendered the tool unavailable, which, it's a blessing and a curse to be considered someone's work a day, I can't live without you tool. Number one, as a product owner, you feel great. I built something people need, but also as a product owner, you have just failed them in their ability to do their jobs. So what I've come to appreciate is everything that you can benefit from when you fail. If you internalize the whys, the hows, how can I prevent this from happening? How do I recover from this? How can I do better? And even most interestingly, how do I master the concept of stakeholder management? Being the person to pick up the phone and make the call and say, we messed up, or, we have this issue. I will personally call you every hour until this is done. And then we will do a full sort of morbidity and mortality, 5 whys, post-mortem, whatever you want to call it. We will explain everything to you because, we have to acknowledge it. We have to own it. We have to be its parent. But that doesn't mean we can't make it better.
No, and then I think that follow through, because what I've seen a lot is, acknowledging, and I see this a lot in corporate, face of, we acknowledge the disaster we've just caused. And then behind the scenes, it's like, well, where's the follow-up? Where's the follow through? And then letting them know. And it sounds like, with the plan, and I love that, that you're going to own it, you're going to call them, and then you're going to be that one every hour that's going to call them to let them know until it's fixed. I think that garners so much respect in that failure, because I think the more or less you admit your failures, the more or less people are going to respect and trust in you. I think everyone knows it's human nature to fail. It is that weakness and vulnerability that if we can own up to it, that garners so much more in terms of that building of that trust, interest, if you will, with others, especially when you're, like you said, you've built this tremendous platform, or you built up this thing that they're using in their business. Now I'm going to own that, I've affected their business, and here's how I'm going to rectify it. That's pretty profound, but I can imagine you didn't learn that overnight. And so if you were thinking about, is this something that when you, were just starting out in your career that you knew you were born, you had that, how did you, from then to now, walk me through that learning process of how you got here?
Absolutely. You think back to, where were you at 18? And what did you know when you were asked, right?
I thought I knew everything. I mean, frankly.
Played a lot of video games, read a lot of books, and thought I knew what I wanted with my life. And, I thought that I was going to have this straight path. I'm just going to I wanted to do bachelor's, MD, PhD, just like go for it, just straight through. And I
Mm-hmm.
found myself course correcting a lot. And what I learned along the way is that you constantly have to be rerouting and learning and
Mm-hmm.
internalizing from your missteps or your false starts.
Yeah.
I think that we're sort of groomed to believe that failure is bad and it has all of these negative connotations.
That's
But
so true.
interestingly, we were talking about parenting earlier.
Yeah.
I have not seen as much failure as I have in my, 4 years of being a parent. And it is the hardest thing to be sitting here, type A, engineer, I want to fix everything, to
Uh-huh.
watch my 3.5-year-old fail all the time
That's so
and to
true.
applaud her, right? Watch her with a puzzle piece trying to fit it in. My instinct is to go in. I just want to put the piece
Put a
in.
piece
Like,
in,
come
right?
on. I know how this works, but that won't help her.
Right.
If
That's
I
true.
let her explore, if I let her develop those techniques,
Mm-hmm.
ask her, what do you think is going to happen? Kind of teach her to think scientifically.
Yeah.
She will be more likely to succeed in the future. So if you take that same philosophy,
Mm.
that sort of, what's better, having that single-minded focus and actually achieving it, or making a few missteps along the way,
Yeah.
the latter path has served me much better. I actually feel like my trajectory is stronger because there's been a dip every so often in what I've been pursuing. But it has been with the ability to be mindful and internalizing everything that has set me back a little bit,
Yeah.
because those setbacks demonstrate what I really want and what I need.
Yeah, no, it's the past two guests that I've had on have talked about this pivot point and these moments in the career that are not linear, and that it's at those great, either fail points or points of inflection or even motherhood, whereby everything changes in how you perceive and look at things. And I think, to your point, I did a disservice with my son. I am the type A too, and I was the one that was like, okay, no, I'm gonna just do. I mean, I'm an only child. I didn't have a lot of experience with other kids and to see sort of how they learn and grow. And then right around when he was 6, he said to me, if you keep doing this, I'm not going to learn. And I remember, like, the wisdom of a child. I need to write a book of his parables, the things that he says to me, because it's always so profound. In the simplest words, children will say something that if you really hear what they're saying or thinking about, I mean, these are really profound moments of how the brain works. And it's so fascinating to me when we talk about curiosity and being endlessly curious as data scientists, to ask the questions. Like, I heard the 5 whys, and I think, man, Simon Sinek beat me to it. I've been using this forever. And, he just wrapped this framework around it. And yet it's so powerful. I'll ask him when he's crying over something, well, why? And we'll keep doing it. And then finally, what started off with like something I didn't understand that was maybe gibberish will end up with the reality of, what his core feeling is, to where now that he's doing that himself, so he can get in touch with himself. And I think, to your point, it was because of having that inflection point for me when he was 6 to say, stop doing everything for me, Mom. I need to learn. And so I think that's pretty powerful. Do you have those same experiences with, in the workplace today, in helping guide and coach maybe those that are younger in their career and, maybe aren't as willing to listen up front, or maybe they are, but how do you guide those, who are, coming in with that same headstronginess, to help them understand that a ton, but I know, not to say I know more, but I have more experience in this field maybe, and I now want to impart that on you with enough room for you to fail and me to accept that when you do.
Right. Two things I do that I love. Number one, I teach professional ed. And this has been such a huge lift to my career because it has helped me to educate and inform, but also to inspire.
Okay.
Because at work, you don't assign people a homework. You don't say, go read this chapter, make this dashboard, and come back to me, right? But you have to inspire them to go think, what is Medicare risk adjustment? I want to find out. And sort of that mindset of, you can have your students check the box, you can have your colleagues check the box, or you can truly give them the tools to go out there and discover something new. That's something I've been trying to build over the last year of my career, is how to inspire, how to lead through collaboration. And I've definitely picked up a lot of mentoring along the way, whether that be internal or external. I found that in the last year of work from home, out of pure social desire, I've started having more casual, Zoom chats with people I hadn't worked with, or people that I'm meeting through social media, through Twitter, the health IT community. And that's been very helpful at sort of building these same skills. And I don't want to say practicing, but getting experience with people outside of my organization and seeing how they learn and what inspires them to further their career takes it brings a lot of knowledge that I then, you know, bring back internally.
Yeah.
So I do I educate via boot camps, but then I also will do a lot of one-on-ones with the team to figure out, you know, number one, if you looked back on what you've achieved with us,
Yeah.
do you even know what you've achieved?
Yeah.
Do you put that into the larger picture? Do you see sort of the box that you were responsible for painting in, or do you realize that that's actually this incredible and beautiful mosaic? So we speak a lot about impact,
That's
about
profound, actually. Yeah, taking their
like
box and
taking
how
that,
does that like wrap into that, you know, full picture, and maybe even that box in and of itself is that mosaic, that beautiful piece of art. Oh my God, that's actually a really profound thought.
we did. So my first healthcare manager, we actually made a mosaic as a team, and that was the story that she was trying to teach us. Is we worked on different products that were part of the same portfolio, but that together we made a mosaic, and we all got a piece of it and kept it on our desk, and it kept us reminded that even that person who sits on the other side of the office, who works on a different product, on a different, you know, use case, there's still a story that we tell together. So we do that. We do a lot of team
amazing. I am actually going to steal that. That is profound, because we have the exact same issues going on a team that's widely dispersed and all virtual now. And we have so many new folks, and how do you make them feel connected and a part of, you know, that connected tissue? Thank you. That is a tremendous idea.
Oh yeah. I'll follow up with you. I'll give you details on how she did it.
That's excellent.
Really cool. Yeah.
Do you still have the piece though? I have to ask. Do you still have? You do?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And that company is, you know, I was there for 6 years, and I think a lot of us took those pieces with us, and that does form a culture that sticks with you. Right. I have teams that I've worked on where they're not part of who I am anymore. But this, you know, we have an alumni group. It was a small company, but that alumni group is actually pretty active. We still talk a lot. So I think that fosters our desire to see more and to learn and know more, but also to stay connected with each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you were making another point there, and I know I got all excited about your idea, but please continue.
No, so it's twofold. So number one is, you know, pursuing being an educator, I think has helped me to learn how to inspire and how to get people to sort of grow further, to not just treat their work as a job. And then, you know, number two is being able to mentor a little bit. And I think I've been doing this in unusual ways. It's definitely been sort of, I want to call it peer counseling, but, you know, a team of randomly selected team members. Again, we work on completely different infrastructures. We have different backgrounds. I don't even meet with most of these people on even a monthly basis. So we made a book club. So this has been great, because what we're doing is we're trying to coalesce on, you know, are the pain points I feel in my part of the org, which is very product centric, very market aligned, similar to what our infrastructure team feels when they are hitting their challenges, or similar to what we see in maybe more of our solutions architecture team. Yeah. And, you know, we pick a book, and we've been working on one around technology marketing. Okay. And we just pile in. And this has been a really great way of kind of making us all better. Number one, we're cross-pollinating. So when we talk about some of the themes in the book, we're like, wait, you're working on what now? Oh, wow, I had no idea. Can you show me a demo of that? Yeah. You know? And so that's the technology marketing book that we've been working through. And honestly, that has kept us going for months. Really? Because,
to write this down. All right, Technology Chasm.
Yeah. This is a very well-known book. It's actually, I think, 20 years old at this point, and they have to keep updating it because technology marketing has changed. But it, you know, it makes you ask, like, what is a product? Right. Who is your market? And, you know, you'd think to yourself, oh, my market is the US healthcare system. And that book will just tear that into shreds.
I was just thinking about, how would you answer that? What is your product? I mean, there's so many answers I could think of from just a Microsoft point of view, but then from a KenSci point of view, do you pick one of them? Is it the Uber elevator pitch? You know, what is true? Is it the service side? Is it the, you know, oh, that's a really profound yet simple.
And even then there's this, like, the most effective image that I think came out of it is, think about a donut. and that most people think their product is that little circle in the middle of like your core capabilities.
Yeah.
And then they talk about everything on the outside that is, your documentation, your ecosystem, your sales channel partners, hardware and software needs. And all of a sudden, user guides, you look at yourself as this, we're a wily little startup company. We're less than 50 people. And you're like, oh, I was a donut hole. That was where I lived. And so I actually had this moment where I was texting one of the collaborators in this book club. And I said, am I failing as a product owner? Because I think that there's a lot here that I still need to be doing. And he said, this is why we have book club. And I think that that's been, that second wave. How are we developing? How are we collaborating? And how do we undo what we maybe had as a misgiving or a misstep in the beginning? Which is, for me, this advice I would give my younger self is, know that you will always be learning. That path that you thought was, straight at 18, because you thought that just getting a degree was it, was only the beginning.
Right.
When I look back on what I learned at school, they gave me the toolkit, but every year there's new tools coming out, and I need to keep bringing them in, and I need to know how to find the right spot for them and when to use them. And that's, I think, the knowledge that I aim to share with everyone is keep learning. Every day.
Continuous learning.
Yeah, we're in a world where you have any number of online learning platforms now where you can do it.
I know, that's the benefit of this time that we've been locked away, is they're popping up everywhere, and yet it's such a embrace them. I mean, it is. Someone was just asking me about what do I do without a PhD, and I'm like, you know what? If I have to keep using the Elon Musk quote that said, if you can write a neural network, you're a data scientist, PhD doesn't matter. I know in context that a PhD matters in research, but I'm trying to impart on folks who don't have one that these online training platforms have tremendous certification programs to teach you some of the hands-on keyboard skill set so that you can be aware of what's happening and how to functionally do it. And then as you're going through your education, that can then augment it more from the business, the ethics, the why you do these things, more of that practicum around it, as opposed to just being so literal and tactical hands-on keyboard. But it is a profound time to be able to go out there and learn. I mean, look at Masterclass. Like, you can go and, like, right now for me, it's the ukulele, because my son refused to learn after this is something he wanted. So I was like, fine, this isn't going to waste. I'm going to learn the ukulele. And it's been Masterclass for me. So I think, to your point, it's a brilliant time to learn. And so if you had to then take your, 18-year-old self, and if you could fast forward her to now and put her in your shoes, when you think about all along the way, the moments of imposter syndrome, the moments where Corinne was going into meetings and you would, either you were the youngest in the room, you were the only woman in the room. And how did you just tell that voice in your head to have the confidence, or, to quiet that nervousness down, that made you feel like you weren't a part of, what was that? How did you quiet that voice? And do you still feel it to this day?
Yep. This is a lot of my early career. I think back to a particular moment when I was a technician at a hospital. I was kind of the lowest on the totem pole. And I kept asking, I was timid. I was like a little mouse, and I wouldn't speak up, and I remember once standing on me, stepped on my foot. And I was so terrified to say something. Oh, no. We're in a cath lab, we're all doing our jobs. People are moving around. And all I could think was, I am literally at the bottom of the totem pole. It is not my place to tell anyone that they're stepping on me. And I remember going home and thinking to myself, really? No, this was admittedly, I think I was 19 and I was just a tech.
Total fairness.
And, I actually ended up doing research on this, and I found a book, which I highly recommend. It's called The Self-Confidence Workbook by Dr. Barbara Markway.
Okay.
And it's a series of, and I mean, in the quaint early 2010 time frame, I'm sitting at the local library, the public library, and I'm printing off pages of this book because it is an actual workbook.
Okay.
And what it does is it asks you to define who you are. And, this was the college journey of self-discovery.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about your strengths, talk about what you like, talk about where you want to go, who you want to be. It basically, lets you build yourself up because you're seeing yourself from the outside. Yeah. It also lets you see that conflict between sort of who you want to be and who you think you are,
Right.
and then find that gap and close it. And what I
I
found,
love that.
this book it's insane.
I know.
because
As soon as we hang up or this
Yeah.
podcast ends, I'm going to Amazon and I'm getting it. It's
Yeah.
resonating at its core with me.
Oh yeah, a lot of the anecdotes are, this scientist, this researcher, she talks about how she would go to these conferences and invariably it would be full of, tables of powerful, well-heeled individuals who would say, I just feel like, I got away with it by presenting at this conference. I can't believe they let me in. And, she said, this is exactly what it's all about, is it's almost like the further you achieve, the more skeptical you are of your own capabilities. And so to overcome it, in the interim, that 18-year-old mousy me started to just become the imposter.
Yeah.
So my imposter scenario was, why can't I just pretend to be the more confident woman?
Fake it till you make it. Yeah.
Yes. And I did.
I love that.
It worked. And so I would go in and, I would say my excuse me's, I would, ensure I have a job to do too.
Yes.
And, I understand if I'm in the way, I will move out of the way. But if I'm just standing there and your way of making me move is to stand on me, I'm not going to allow it. So I went in with a little bit more empowerment. It took a few months of this sort of, building myself up, but I have seen a difference. And since then, I've done all of those personality inventories over the years and definitely seen it change. And now,
have you done Myers-Briggs? I'm just curious what you are.
I believe I was an INPJ. I tilting E, I would say.
And you said IMP as in Peter or T as in Tom?
Key.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. And so what do you know what that was? I mean, I know that I was an I leaning towards ENTJ, or INTJ, which is the scientist. Yeah. What was, do you remember what yours was?
No, it definitely was more on the engineering side as well. Similarly, in the sense that, I'm very data driven. Yeah. But I think in my career, I've moved into more of the, like, we just need to make decisions and we need to get through it. If the data, when the data is there, I will go after it. But sometimes in the absence of it,
we have to just do it. That's the boss woman. Like, that's the strength that's coming through this. And I love that. So I say all the time to folks, the fake it till you make it scenario. And sometimes I think people cringe and I'm like, no, there is a backing to this. And if you come into a room and you believe that you don't belong there, that everyone else is going to sense you don't belong there. If you go into the room and you're in there for a reason, you didn't stumble into this room accidentally, you were invited. Just remember that sort of, notion. And so I know we're running out of time here and I have to ask you my last question. See, this is why I love talking to you, because picking your brain is fascinating to me. You're just one of these women that inspires me. And I mean, I left our last chat and immediately went back into thinking differently about how I was approaching some of the stuff around healthcare and the way I was just looking at it. And, it's because maybe it's the parables you heard from your former boss, or maybe it's just who you are today, Corinne. But, if you had to think about who you'd bring to a dinner party that reflected maybe Corinne and who she wants to talk to at this dinner party, either dead or alive, either fictional or real, who would those people be and why?
Okay. My beloved Oliver Sacks. So he was a neurologist who wrote these anecdotal case studies that shaped my approach to science and engineering, which is in full appreciation of their beauty, of their almost intent and randomness simultaneously. He's the one who actually, it's his work that drove me into healthcare, into a more technical pursuit of healthcare. And he was just an all-around beautiful human being who appreciated the sort of journey of humanity. He's who I would want to talk to, because I think that if he had a perspective on the world that we currently work in and live in, sort of what does it mean to, I use this phrase a lot, what does it mean to personalize healthcare at scale? That's a very interesting challenge. And I would love to know his take on it as a clinician, as a scientist, and almost as a humanist.
Yeah. Wow. I'm thinking through what my answer would be to that same question. That is a really profound question to ask somebody to really, especially coming from the clinical and humanist perspective. I think that when we talk about personalizing something and then you talk about it at scale, those are typically two diametrically opposed ideas that you're now, combining into one. Wow. It's always interesting to me to think about the folks that people would bring. And so is there anybody else you would bring as your second Your
I was
second
looking
guest?
at Mary Curie.
Oh, okay.
Just
She's one
this
of my
concept
heroes.
of, one of a family of Nobel Prize winners, setting forth as first in many ways as well, and also in pursuit of things that at times could have been dangerous, where
Yeah.
you may not have had the right tools or the right protections, and working in a field where maybe, I don't want to say policy, but concepts of safety
Yeah.
and regulation weren't in existence yet. And there are many parallels to what we do today when we let technology get ahead of ourselves.
Right.
So I've recently become aware of something like the Center for Humane Technology.
Mm-hmm.
And what do these organizations offer to those of us working in advanced analytics and technology in helping to set guardrails up that weren't around when scientists like Marie Curie were doing their work? We may lack them, but the only people who might set them up for us are ourselves. And so I'd ask her a little bit more about, at what point did she realize what she was doing could have been dangerous and risking her own livelihood and her well-being by the work that she did, but still she forged onward because she was in pursuit of greater knowledge for humanity.
Yeah, no, I think asking her, just when we talk about personal risks that we put ourselves in, either not setting boundaries or giving up of our time or spending time away from families, as just a corollary. And you think about then risking your actual physical life. And is there a point by which, she just didn't care about what could be her personal detriment because it was for the betterment of the greater good? And,
Right.
When I think through, well, I feel like I do that all the time. And yet, we're not working for the greater good of humanity. I'm working through, building a team and trying to make them effective. And yet there's still a corollary there to having that passion and drive about something you believe in and seeing it through to fruition. I actually think Marie Curie would be a fantastic person to have to talk to. She's also one of my great heroes. Corinne, thank you so very much for being on the Annielytics podcast today. I really look forward to chatting with you more. I mean, we have active work streams that are going to, coalesce and bring us back together very soon. And I'm excited about that. So thank you, listeners, for having an ear today to listening to Corinne talk about her journey. I think she's a fascinating woman, and thank you for being on the Annielytics podcast.
Loved what you've heard on this week's episode? Well, the answer is simple. It would mean the world to us if you could head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star review and feedback. Spreading the word really is the best way to grow our podcast and achieve even greater things. Thank you.